Well, everyone, it's Shane Conto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And we're moving right along here on my 60 weeks of Alfred Hitchcock. We're about 8 weeks in, so making good progress so far. But joining me for this episode is my friend and a bit of a Renaissance woman. It's Larissa Benfey. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And we will be talking about the Alfred Hitchcock film, Easy Virtue. And I have a little bit of background on the film. And when I mean a little bit, it is really a little bit. So this was released March 5th, 1928. This film is about an hour and 20 minutes. This was actually a restoration from 2012. It looks like a lot of this era of Hitchcock films wind up being restored back in 2012. This is based on Noel Coward's 1924 play Easy Virtue, which has been adapted quite a few times as early and as recent as 2008. It looks like there was a remake of it. And famous art director Clifford Pember worked on the film with his very modernist influences. And you could definitely tell, and I'm sure at some point it'll come up like there's some really good looking like architecture and stuff like that in this movie. But that's it. That's all the background that I have on this movie. So there you go. But here is the synopsis for our film. A recently divorced woman hides her scandalous past from her new husband and his family. And the fact that her past is scandalous is kind of messed up, but I'm sure we'll get into that. But Larissa, what were your general thoughts on Easy Virtue?
So there was a lot of like firsts for me with this one. It was my
Mhm.
first feature-length silent film that I've watched.
Okay,
Yeah, so I was like, I knew what to
glad to be a
expect.
part of it.
Yeah, thank you for your part in this. I knew what to expect, obviously, because I've seen clips of silent films, I've seen short ones. But just like watching a full feature-length silent film was just like so strange. Um, and Like I was a big fan of just like it was 100 years ago and just seeing the kind of like camera angles he chose,
Mm,
like set design, like there's all these things that I was just like, this is you can tell why he was the director that he was and like the
yeah.
influence he had was really cool. But as the story goes, and like I know it was a play first, so it's not like it was
Mm,
Hitchcock's idea, but the story I was just like, this is a strange thing to choose to spend a lot of time like telling the story because it kind of felt like I don't know, hating on mother-in-laws maybe. It was like a big moral of the story and it yeah, so I was just like, yeah, it's an interesting one, but I think I took different things out of it than the audience 100 years ago would have. I didn't yeah, I thought, yeah, well, I don't know. I feel like I'm still digesting it a bit. Um, but those were my initial thoughts on it.
Well, I'm just glad that you weren't on my last episode when it was a 2 hour and 9 minute silent film that had even less plot. This one, which
Oh,
obviously this film, I feel like starts with a bang
yeah.
and then lulls out for like a long period of time before it comes back to have anything like substantially like hook grabbing you back into the action of this. Because this starts off with some like really messed up stuff
Yep.
and some pretty dark stuff
Hmm.
and this abusive relationship. And of course, it's all her fault.
Of course.
And that gets saddled on her and her, you know, hiding her past and gaining her easy virtue,
Hmm.
which why would she lose her virtue in the first place when she didn't do anything wrong?
Right?
Which, like, that's not the story that they would tell in 1928. It's how dare you even be considered by your husband to be cheating on him?
Yep.
And then it's just like, well, it's all your fault. And, he divorces her, leaves her with nothing, and it's just like, there goes her reputation. And it's
Yep.
just like, husband character was extremely jealous and makes these accusations, has this whole fight with this other man, but it's all her fault.
Yep.
So I guess that's 1928 math. In terms of relationship math on things where it's just like, so husband does this, husband does this, husband does this equals wife's fault.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at with this.
Yeah.
And obviously the everybody in the world within this film's like, what a heathen, what a what a harlot. And then
Yeah.
us as the audience, I'm pretty sure Hitchcock's supposed to be getting like, yeah, this is wrong and this should never have happened. And then, you get into this whole entire other section of the film where it's like she went away, she's at the French Riviera, she's trying to move on with her life. I didn't realize that's an option. Like your whole entire life gets broken down and you have no money, and then you could just go to the French Riviera and,
Yeah.
live it up. But,
Yep.
as women did in 1928, apparently. Uh, and then she meets this guy, and then it turns into like not exactly the most engaging of romance films. And it's just like, well, this is happening. Well, this is happening. And then we get into the third act of this movie where then it turns into like, oh my God, his mother hates this woman and will
Mhm.
do anything to make sure this never happens. And then our main character is forced to be like the bigger person in this
Yeah.
situation, where it's just like he even tells her husband's new husband's ex, you should have married him all along. And it's just like this woman's just going around being like, you know, I deserve nothing. You deserve all of this. But I have to say,
Hmm.
Larita, by the very end, that final line,
Mm.
which I thought was a killer line to end this on and really just hammers home uh everything that this film really stands for, where she's like, shoot, there's nothing left to kill. I'm just like, damn.
Yeah.
I honestly, by the end, liked this movie more because of that very specific final line of it. Because I'm like, that was a badass line. And I'm
Yeah.
like, damn, he nailed it. He nailed it for sure. I'm like, I give a lot of credit to Isabel Jones, who plays Larita here, who she really has to anchor this whole entire movie because like we're going with her throughout all of this.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of emotion here. There's certainly a lot of emotion towards the beginning of the film. There's obviously this emotion towards the end of the film, but then it gives way to like this confidence. And besides that final part where she comes in and they're like, don't go to this thing. And she's like, I'm gonna go to this thing. And just the confidence and the presence she has on screen, I'm like, it's electric. Like that's
Hmm.
something special right there. And that's
Hmm.
some good bit of acting for film from this far back in history. I'm like, there were some things in here that I really appreciated. And it almost tricked me into thinking that I really loved this movie, despite the fact that I was probably disengaged for like roughly 45 minutes of it in the middle, which is the
Hmm.
challenging thing. Cause like, you watch a film and like the last thing that happens when you have a really good ending, it can really trick you into thinking like this was a great experience. I'm like, but what
Wait.
was I doing the past 45 minutes before this?
Yeah.
So, I guess, Larissa, were there particular things that did really stand out to you that you particularly liked about the film?
Well, so that scene in particular when she's like that confidence scene. I was thinking I should know more film history. But I was like, is this one of the first scenes ever of that iconic moment that like has been reproduced so many times where the woman shows up at the top of the stairs and like everyone looks at her and like I was just like, is this one of the first ones that ever like has been recorded on film? Because that's pretty huge and like it was a really big moment in the film, and I
Mhm.
loved that they like had that moment for her. Um,
She
that so that
deserved
stood
it
out.
after all the things that she went through in this movie.
That stood out, and then again, like the acting choices were like because as an actor, like acting has changed so much in the last
Mhm.
100 years, and like it's the same medium but like
Yeah.
used differently. And again, like silent film is gonna be a bit different. So yeah, I loved like that there was this mix of theatricality and
Mhm.
like more film acting. So there was sometimes like close-up shots, and
Yeah.
like some of the close-up shots I was just like, this is hilarious because like the entire camera angle has changed and said like there's a different backdrop, but we're on a close-up of this person, and then we kind of like go back to the other shot and it's like a completely different version of the scene. And I was like,
Mhm.
interesting choice that we made there. Um, but yeah, I think it was yeah, I think that there's like the scene that one that sticks out to me is like when the husband, like the ex-husband
Yeah.
is uh beating the perceived like the possible lover. I was just like, oh man, yeah, fight scenes have definitely changed in 100 years. Um, so yeah, there's just it's so weird watching it 100 years later, just being like trying not to make fun of a lot of this stuff because it was definitely revolutionary at the time, but it's a little
Yeah.
bit corny now.
Well,
Um,
and what's interesting is because like Hitchcock was a big boxing fan, and one of the other films that I did recently was The Ring. Not that ring. Um, uh, and it's like this was about rival boxers who not only were rival boxers but were romantic rivals for one of their wives.
ooh.
And yes, very saucy. And it has a boxing match at the end.
Hmm.
And it's a lot of like
Yes.
and like which I gave it credit for like this was some intense fight choreography for 1927.
Hmm.
But like we've seen very different types of boxing sequences in film since then. Obviously, like Rocky's trying to be much more naturalistic, and Raging Bull's being very artful.
Hmm.
With it where it doesn't even look like a actual uh real type of boxing match and stuff like that. But one particular there was a couple of shots here I know at the very beginning, and it's so funny because I've watched a lot of these with my wife so far and she knows what I'm going to comment. I'm like, ooh, that was a really interesting choice there, or like that was a really interesting shot, because like I love like the technical aspects of film, and Hitchcock was a master and really offered so many dynamic choices as a director. And it's wild that like this man's in his 20s here doing all of these things. And that bottle shot at the very beginning where it's like this close up of the bottle and it just like pulls out and you're just like, I immediately was like, wow, that was a really interesting shot. And
Yep.
that's the thing, employed a lot of close-ups and zoom in zoom out on people and their reactions to build tension.
Hmm.
And obviously you would see how that evolves over time with combining those things. And like Vertigo, the whole Vertigo effect is you know lens changing and camera movement at the same time to get this disordered feel. And
Right.
there's moments where it's just like this pull out of somebody's face and their like reaction as we get the bigger picture of how they're feeling. And you saw that a couple times in this film in particular. I was surprised by how quite violent this was at the beginning. Um, might not have been like the most refined choreography of violence, but still very violent for 1928. And it's
Yeah.
interesting seeing because some of his other films where it's a little bit more creative in
Mm.
how they present the violence. Because like you could get a lot of impact out of catching shadows
Mm-hmm.
and doing stuff like that. I'm really looking forward to recording my blackmail episode because that one was like had a lot of awesome things in it. But you also notice that, especially when they went to the French Riviera part, the fashion and the production design was just so elaborate and interesting. And then,
Hmm.
you have this mansion towards the end with this richer family that she gets involved with and everything. And that goes a long way in terms of capturing this cinematic feel to it, where it's like, this feels lived in, this feels real,
Hmm.
instead of, somebody threw up like a wall and put a camera and you're just
Yeah.
acting in front of it. Because like I've watched especially over the past like 2 years or so, I've watched so many old films, and like I mean old as in like 1900s,
Whoa.
like the early 1900s. And so much of film back then was like, you had one stationary camera, you pointed at something, and
True.
you all came in and out. It was like a play.
Yeah.
And this, one of the things I noticed immediately is Hitchcock's films don't feel 100% like plays. They feel dynamic. There's choices that he's making to make it more interesting. And even just like wide shots of like that one dinner scene where the dinner table makes up like maybe a third or a fourth of the screen, and the height of the ceiling so large. And like we didn't have to do that. But it does
Hmm.
capture just how rich and how opulent this life is. And like,
Right.
wow, Larita like found her way into something here. It's like she deserves it. And then they ripped it away from her.
Hmm.
But I did feel bad for her a lot. But at the end, she was a real boss at the end. And she's just like, I have faith in her and what
Nice.
she's gonna do after this. Um, she obviously is gonna have a hard time because this is just gonna keep following her, which is extremely unfortunate
Yeah.
and horrible. But I'm saying something so controversial and here, but like, women haven't always had it the easiest.
Shock. Yeah.
Shocking, so brave, so controversial.
Yeah.
But I guess Larissa, was there anything else that stood out to you about the film?
I was thinking like, so again, first silent film feature length.
Mhm.
I was shocked by how much there was like talking happening and like interactions happening and like no speech cards on the screen. And I was just like, but I still like that was a like testament to their acting and the like filmmaking was like I was like I know what they're saying for the most part without actually seeing it and like I understand the interactions that are happening um and it's completely silent like there's not music that's helping me figure
Yeah.
this out like there's no words but so that was another big thing where I was just like this is wild I never thought that that would be the case but yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because that is actually a Hitchcock trademark of these
Mm,
early silent films, that he actively tried to minimize the actual dialogue cards he needed in the film, because his perspective is, I'm making a film, you should be able to tell what's going on based off of what I'm presenting. And it works.
yeah.
It really works. And you don't need like 50 million dialogue cards. And then you're just like, am I watching a movie? And then you're just like trying to read and read and read and read. Cause like like a drama like this is so challenging in old silent films, because like you're just people talking and you're just gonna get a lot of dialogue that you have to read throughout the whole entire thing. But here he made a really concerted effort to minimize that and lean on visual storytelling and let his actors do a lot of the storytelling. And I think that was very effective here for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, that was really cool. And then the sets, like I loved the sets. They were like the one that kind of like came up a lot with the staircase
Mhm.
into the kind of like living area. That one was cool and I love that they kind of like it was always it had like the wide shot of like the staircase coming down to the area at all times.
Mhm.
Unless it was like a closer up shot. And so yeah, it kind of did just like show the opulence at all times. They were just every shot was used to like um, display a bunch of different things, and it was always like coming across and just wild that he was able to do that.
Mhm. Absolutely. And you know, it made it so I think it made it so much more impactful and heartbreaking towards the end that like after all that stuff that Larita went through at the beginning of the film, that she found this and she found him. And it's like, wow, maybe life isn't terrible and might actually do something good for this woman for once, and then just tore it right away. But like the concerted effort to keep building up this lifestyle was important. And it also reinforced just how, how disconnected that her new husband's mother is.
Hmm.
And, you know, not to make generalizations, but, a lot of families that are that rich want to make sure that they stay rich and want to make sure that their reputations are held in check. And it's
Hmm.
so funny because, like, this is almost the whole entire main plot of the Downton Abbey grand finale film
Right.
was about reputation and stuff like that and overcoming that and standing by your loved ones, unlike this one.
Yeah.
Uh, but I guess that's the difference between Downton Abbey and a Hitchcock film. Um,
Hmm.
Hitchcock isn't going to give you the happy ending, but
New.
this was out of the ones I've watched so far, somewhere in the middle. Like I think the thrillers so far that I've watched are the ones that really, really worked for me. And it's not a surprise. It's Alfred Hitchcock, so he still had that in him at the very beginning of his career. But
Mhm.
this has a it's one of those films where it's like I'm gonna remember the first act well. I'm gonna remember the third act real well.
Yep.
I don't remember much of what happened in the middle, but there's some really good stuff on either end of the second act of this movie. And
Yep.
there's enough, like this movie's 80 minutes.
Yeah.
So like the that is indeed a feature length film and especially much more common back then.
Mm.
Um you know, good 80-minute film's always a fun time.
Hmm.
And you're out. But I guess, Larissa, do you have any last minute thoughts before we wrap up our discussion of Easy Virtue?
I think the only other thing that I was trying to figure out, like, is this a time period thing or I don't know. But I found it interesting that like one of the only like dialogue cards that existed, since there was only probably like 20, one
Hmm.
of them was this discussion they had between them. I think it was like leading into the right before she met his family.
Hmm.
She said something about like he said I love you and she was like you don't even know me and he's like no, that's fine. Like I love you. And I was just like, okay, this feels like I've got an idea of what's to come. So it was interesting because it was almost a throwaway line, but like there are no throwaway lines in like
Yes.
Chuck. And so that one was another thing where I was just like, this feels really intentional and really cool that it was done this way. So yeah, it was just strange.
They planted that seed well
Yeah.
of like, and for people who've watched so many movies and especially more modern movies where it's like, this could only go well.
Yeah.
And where it's just like, you don't even know me. It's like, oh, that doesn't matter. I love you. And you're just like, hmm.
Yeah.
Especially a whole entire movie where the whole plot of the film is that she's trying to hide her past because of her baggage.
Yeah.
Um, and now I'm just imagining that Jerry Springer game show called Baggage, where it's just like Lorita's like her husband almost murdered her not lover because all a misunderstanding, but she took all the blame. And you're just like, so why is this baggage and why was this her fault?
Yeah.
Because 1928 culture. So there you go. Because back then, apparently, it was always the woman's fault. So,
Hmm.
because, men could do no wrong.
Yeah.
Still can't, right? Am I
Yeah.
right? So, obviously. But that is our discussion of Alfred Hitchcock's 1928 film, Easy Virtue. Next week, I'm going to be obviously continuing this on because I, have like 52 more of these to do. And I will be talking about the romantic comedy Champagne with my filmmaker and actor friend Anna Campbell. So I'm looking forward to recording that one. But Larissa, thank you so much as always for coming on and talking some movies with me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.